Okay, so let's recap what we've seen so far. In the opening, we went over the fact that this is designed for the IT generalist. Simple, fast business outcomes that enable a generalist to manage their entire data lifecycle from the initial creation of the data to protecting the data to moving it to the cloud for additional insight for their businesses, and then eventually retiring that data to something like Glacier. So what I'm going to cover now, we've covered the first part of that data lifecycle journey through the protection mechanism. Now we're going to take a look at how you can leverage your data beyond protection for additional business insight. To enable you to see how we do that, I'm going to go a little bit under the covers, a little bit more than we have, to show you how we expose that data for business insight. So as Charlotte covered in the previous section, we have the initial workflow from the initial creation of data on your primary systems, leveraging the secondary system for copy to cloud and moving it to the cloud. By the way, when the capability for moving it from primary directly to the cloud happens, the copy to cloud instance and the NDAS proxy will reside on the primary, okay? But for the initial workflow, it's primary to secondary to AWS. And that is accomplished when the copy to cloud data mover moves the data to the S3 bucket in AWS. Now you see a closer look at how the application itself is constructed. There's an AMI instance leveraging EC2 in Amazon. And then you see a scalable architecture for the catalog where there are a number of instances depending on the amount of data that you're moving to the cloud. And then the data itself resides in buckets that in the initial versions the customer brings to NDAS, and later versions of NDAS will enable the creation of a native bucket through NDAS itself. And from a futuristic standpoint, we will add additional sources. We've covered the ONTAP sources that we've articulated, but there are potential other data sources beyond the sources that we've talked about today. I'm not at liberty to explain what those exact sources are, but we will expand the number of data sources in the future. In addition, there'll be other workflows from a data protection perspective. We've covered backup, but remember, this is a data protection solution for the hybrid cloud. So beyond beyond backup, there is business continuity concerns that a customer has. So when they're designing their backup, they're also concerned about keeping their applications up and running in case the initial data source itself is offline for whatever reason. So that's a future data workflow that will be exposed to an IT generalist in the future. And for the purpose of this section, though, there's the leverage of data beyond data protection for additional services. You see other microservices that we intend to expose from the S3 repository for our customers through the NDAS application. They could be analytics. You see dev tests there. There are bursty applications that are spun up and down. There are compliance applications that are important for data privacy. We've talked about GDPR and what have you. So the application itself will provision the capability to onboard these applications for the customer. And that's what we'll show you in the next demo. We'll show you an example of moving data to the cloud and having various hyperscaler services mine that data for a few example applications. And that is what Charlotte is now going to demonstrate in this next video. But before I go to that video, were there any questions about what I exposed there from an architectural perspective?
So the data analytics that's associated with these applications, they run under the NDAS marketplace, or are they provisioning AWS services to point to that? Or
I don't have that part of it to show you, but envision sort of a marketplace within NDAS itself that exposes available service to you. So you have that interface that Charlotte showed you. There'll be an additional interface that says, okay, these potential services are now available for you to instantiate against the object store itself. Select the ones that you want to use, and there'll be a workflow to enable that service on that object store.
So potentially you could open this to partners.
Yes.
Having partners.
Exactly, yes.
Integrating these services on top of it.
Yes. So that's the reason. That's the initial reason for the API. Remember, keep in mind, this is for a business. This is for an IT generalist, person who doesn't even know how to use an API, for example. So what we're going to do that work for the generalist using a RESTful API, but in a very cloud-friendly manner. This is not for the specialist who's going to do some programming against the data in the early days.
Dave Hitz's JSON example. Yeah.
Yes.
No JSON required.
No JSONs.
Yeah.
So Joe, if those services are triggering other components, like for instance, say you use some of them under Lambda or something like that.
Yes.
You almost need, because it's cloud and it's not sitting on your own hardware, you almost need like an ability to look at the cost of running that function. So imagine you want to run the analytics and you know it's going to trigger 1 million Lambda calls or 10 million or 100 million. You probably want to know that if you execute this is going to cost you money. And you probably are going to want to make sure somebody's going to get charged for that appropriately. Do you have any thoughts about how you might look at that, going forward?
Yes, as I said, our focus is on the IT journalist, and we don't want the IT journalist to get in trouble and do something. This could be a great sandbox. Oh, look at all the toys. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and then all of a sudden, their boss gets a $1 million bill at the end of the month. That we don't want to happen. So, in the underlying architecture, we know we can anticipate the costs. We can actually predict the costs. But in the early days, that's not something we're going to expose. But you're exactly right. That is a pain point, and that precludes some customers from actually going to the cloud. Yeah. They only put safe, quote unquote, workflows to the cloud that don't comprise much data because, one, they're concerned about security, and there could be a cost aspect that they can't anticipate. And for the IT generalists may not even be aware of those two. So we have to do the work for them to keep them out of trouble. And that's what this product is about, and you can anticipate that in the future.
And I guess also if you are IT running backups or offering these services on behalf of IT towards other lines of business, that they might come to you and say, great, you can now run analytics against all of our data for us, and we can see what's going on, blah, blah, blah. That's now a billable service back to that team, and that team wants a way of being able to identify what their charges are and possibly budget or plan for it, So I can see how it can have lots of positive things for IT in that sense.
Exactly. The reason an IT generalist is a generalist is they have too much to do, right? And they don't have time to specialize anymore. And to mine that pain point for our customers is to allow pass-through to their end users so they don't have to do the work for them. Again, there's an underlying infrastructure. It requires RBAC. Someone mentioned RBAC here. In the past, we're aware of that. And that's a pain point we have to solve for the IT generalist. Yep.
All righty. This is going to show in-place direct access to the data using a stack that we kind of built within engineering, but it's a pretty powerful proof of concept of the power of the format and the ability to make it available to certain applications. So I'm going to show it. We are not. There we go. Better. Okay. So we're going to show in-place, in-cloud data analytics. I'm going to show a couple of demonstrations of e-discovery and data visualization. So just to show you the setup, so this is a kind of a different way of showing that we backed up data with NDAS, right? And the source data that we used to show the demo was actually NetApp's internal emails about competition and our own stuff, kind of like an old-fashioned Slack, if you like. But they're actually exposed as emails. But it could be different formats. It could be PDF, it could be email data. And we backed it up with NDAS to a secondary system, and then we shut it off into the cloud. There it is, going into the cloud. Okay, so NDAS was used to move the data in the cloud, but then what else could we do with the data once it got there? So it's in this self-contained data format that we've kind of alluded to, where we preserve the metadata, the file system structure. We built a stack in order to comprise this is a fairly complex way of doing things, and as we productize this, we would make this a lot simpler. But for the purpose of a proof of concept, the kind of translation area, if you like, is this blue box here, which essentially makes what, getting back to your point about earlier, what does it look like in the bucket? If you just go in the bucket, you just simply see object names. They're 4 megabyte objects, and no one can really translate what there are. But with the plugin, then you can go and say a Linux machine and look at your file, and it just looks like a different type of file system, not an NFS, but say a Cloud FS or something like that. So now that's native format that these other applications can look at. So a magic layer, conversion layer, but notice it didn't have to copy the data or whatever. It's directly off of the S3 bucket. In fact, I basically delete all the ONTAP part of it to show that there's no ONTAP in the picture.
So the workflow for me as someone who wants to use that is basically I take a Linux machine somewhere, I install stack, I do a mount my special stack on this S3 bucket.
That would be one way of doing it. I mean, that'd be pretty handcrafted method,
But,
as opposed to a nice little service offering that just says, "Where's my bucket?" But I mean, in theory, this is literally just a plugin that could run on.
We would technically do it that way, but it would be in the language of a generalist, though.
Yes,
We wouldn't
you
be
would
talking
expose
about
it to it.
Linux machines and whatever.
Yep. So what we're doing, just as a demo, like a keyword search, right? So we're searching against the files that have been backed up into S3, and we're looking for a keyword like A800, which is our all-flash FAS. So it retrieves all of the individual emails that include the keyword A800, and we could click on them and do a single file restore, and then work more on those. So
you've cracked the text of the emails open, or is this just a title search?
We've done a certain amount of indexing. I mean, we kind of. Let's see, if I go back to the...
no, I saw the content.
There's a content parser, and it figures out, is it email, is it PDF, is it different data types, and so on. I mean, this...
So it actually does crack the file open in this case.
Yeah. But there's different layers in terms of, reassembling the object into the file and then performing a single file restore. Okay. And then the second demonstration, let me just restart that. Is using Cabana for data visualization. And again, we can just do that in place. So we built a query that just analyzes the email to show some trends over time. So, we can see that the top keywords that we detected in our email stream. You can see we spend a lot of time talking about cloud all year long. Same thing with Flash is the next one. Yeah, so just highlight me. What time of year do we talk about Flash? NVMe kind of peaks more towards, this is data from last year, and then max data, that only started appearing at the end of the year. I mean, this could be literally any kind of visualization, but it's just showing you that we've got the data into the cloud. How can we access it via services? And from a pure historical perspective, to get information going back from years and years and years. And pretty much every customer that we talk to, we say, what would it mean to you to have that data in place and to have it off your primary production systems? It's all off-sourced into the cloud. What would it mean to you? What kind of business insights, what would it help you to do? And everybody, as soon as they start thinking about it for even a few seconds, just comes up with extremely fascinating examples. I mean, getting back to the baseball ones that Joe started earlier with, but, road safety and I don't know, flight analysis and any industry that you can figure out a way to use this. Okay. All right, so we've
Are there any questions about the demo before we get into a wrap-up?
Do you think there are any customers who would look at it and just say, I'm not even going to bother doing this for data protection, I might just do it for analytics purely, because the analytics service on its own could be valuable?
Interesting. Yeah. Well, we can. We sort of envisage it as a data protection solution and a simple interface. But you could look at it as almost like the Trojan horse. It's like, hey, you know what? You're going to get this backup for free, and you'll get the data in place. Sort of flipping the whole thing on the end, as opposed to you have to do data protection, and did you know that you could also do this? So. Yeah, I think there's probably different ways we could go to market.
Some companies might look at it and say that internally it might be an easier sell to sell the service on the idea of the value of the analytics you could do than it would be to sell it on the value of the overhead of doing backups, if you like. So, I'm not saying that's the way to sell it. I'm saying, some people might look at it and think that's a way of using it, and that takes it away from the generalist idea and makes it more of a sort of value-add service that you're offering rather than just a data protection service.
Yeah, well, that's so. I think what you're saying is that we should have flipped the demos around. We should have shown the data analytics demo first. And it says, how would you like to do this? Well, you know, you can do it this way, and it's going to be super simple, and so on. No, that's it.
Yes, the data protection is a way to collect data.
Yes, exactly.
People don't tend to get excited about data protection, do they? I mean, they just know they.
Well,
want to
if you
do
look
it,
at
right? But-
all data protection vendors, they are talking about data management now,
Yeah.
and they are
Yeah.
data protection like
Yeah.
the other day. So nobody wants to talk about data protection anymore.
Another quick.
until they lose data.
So
No, yes,
They tend to, yeah.
but it's still data management.
Yeah, it's. Yeah.
One of the questions about the data that you were presenting that you're indexing there.
Yep.
I can mount that from particular snapshots, so I can choose the point in time to index again. I'm actually thinking of a very specific use case in a GDPR context where people have requests for deletion.
Okay.
And one of the tools for secondary management that I'm seeing come out has been the ability to say, well, we did a search on our data structures,
Yep.
and here's all the places that we found you, and our audit report is, and we did the same search after going through our cleanup process, and here we show you the audit that you are no longer present in these live data sources. For example, that's one of the use cases. So can we specify sort of comparisons or mount points for doing indexing between different snapshot point in time, or is it always, today I mentioned the workflow is just the content that's there.
Right. Yeah. Well, when you get to do the restore, I mean, you can choose which particular snapshot you want to restore, which particular version of the data.
Right.
In terms of making the data available then to those instances, yeah, there would be granularity available. I mean, yeah, sure, you don't want to run a job that's predicting, I don't know, travel patterns against your office,
Yep.
email data. Yeah, I mean, we would offer that granularity, and then it would choose which particular pieces were enabled for that service. Yeah.
And I could do differentials, say, between two time slices. That's what I'm thinking of.
Do a comparison report,
Exactly.
before and after.
You know, I'm going to let Atul take this one. So, Atul, yeah.
So I think,
microphone.
Yeah.
So you can look
You
at
need
these
to-
snapshots as similar to like on-tap snapshot.
Okay.
So you can like today mount any on-tap snapshot and perform operation, right? So the power of the format is similar. We are doing similar thing with objects while preserving storage efficiency and providing access to any snapshot, data through any snapshot, right? So that's the power. So definitely you can mount, access any specific snapshot. We can definitely do things like, identify the differences between two snapshots and try to do something intelligent around that.
Okay.
So yeah, both things should be possible.
So yeah, we can definitely build workflows to do that kind
Yeah,
of thing.
we can.
About the workflows, so can you make them repeatable, like automate all the process? So, for example, if I want to do an analytics job after each single backup,
Yeah.
and work on the difference, work on whatever, especially not, for example,
Right.
ransomware.
Yeah.
You want to check what happened yesterday and what today, and if you find a strange pattern in file
Yeah,
modification
sure.
and so on, you raise an alarm somehow, but you need to run a series of steps every time.
I mean, I think all those workflows should be possible. They don't exist in the first release. But yes, I mean, it's kind of like an event notification, right? I think some of these things today are possible in cloud. So for example, you can trigger a Lambda function when an object lands or something like that, right? And then in that Lambda function also, you can code steps that you want to do. So that's one way to do it. Since we have a cloud orchestrator running, we always know when the transfers are complete, when the next one is scheduled, and we can always look at some of these workflows to be automated.
Yeah, but if you start to talk about a Lambda function, the IT generalist.
Yeah. I think from the service perspective, these are not the mechanisms that will be exposed to IT generalists, but these are some of the things today exist in a cloud. I think we can make we can make them simpler from the IT generalist perspective, where they don't have to do all that automation, and we can potentially do it in the NDAS.
Okay.
What about Glacier? Glacier, you're going to be able to move the data from S3 to Glacier?
Yes, I mean, I think the Amazon allows in case of AWS, it allows a couple of ways to move the data to Glacier. You can always set up object lifecycle policies on that, and that's the way you can move the data from S3 to Glacier. Recently, Amazon announced where you can now even start writing data directly to Glacier, and we are definitely looking into that as well.
So it won't be through the NetApp product. You've
No,
got
it
to go
will,
in
no,
there.
Yeah, oh,
it
yeah.
will be.
No, it will be through
Okay,
NetApp
okay.
product.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would just appear maybe as a different
There'll be-
target, and
yeah.
maybe you have certain workflows. Like we get customers who are like,
Yeah.
you know, I finish a project, and maybe that's a chip design, or it's a movie, or it's a whatever. And whereas today or yesterday I might have dumped that all onto tape, right? I want to do the same thing. Send it straight out to this low cost, you know, slow access
Right.
storage. So yeah, and that could all be policy driven through.
So we'll extend what you saw here to an archival workflow. And so the customer will be able to keep it there at a low-cost storage for safekeeping. But we do know there are use cases where it's actually pulled back.
Right.
There's some chip designers that have chip designs that are from 10 years ago, let's say, and now production processes have increased to the level where they can actually reuse the old chip designs because of the new fabrication processes and create new chips. So we want to make sure that we extend the data lifecycle, as I mentioned, to archival, but also be able to bring it back to restart the data lifecycle in case things change, right?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, yep.
Are there plans to integrate this with SnapCenter?
There are no plans to integrate the two directly. They're two different, the applications are designed for two different personas.
Okay.
SnapCenter is designed for the application specialist who needs a lot of all the detailed knobs, and that's a special use case, a special end user. NDAS is for the generalist, so the two are distinct.